Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time talk about episode 9 of the only season there's ever going to be of Green Lantern the animated series. And yes, if you haven't heard, then Green Lantern the animated series has officially been canceled by Cartoon Network. One of the show's forerunner has confirmed this on his Twitter account. And, well, needless to say, a lot of the show's fans are, including myself, are really upset about this. I know that in these reviews I've talked about how I was really hoping we would see eventually a version of this famous storyline, the War of Light, maybe the Black Lanterns, and just really, this show is a perfect chance to really showcase the wonderful and amazing mythology of Green Lantern. And so far, while not without its flaws, this show has done a really good job of doing that. And just to kind of have that taken away is just such a tremendous disappointment. Now, I know there are fans out there who are trying to run petitions and all this other stuff to maybe get Cartoon Network to reconsider, and I certainly wish them the best with that, but I'm really not an optimist when it comes to fan petitions. So, but anyway, we are here to talk about this episode, so let's just get right into it. Now, this is kind of an interesting episode to look at because so much of it is rooted in the politics of the galaxy. Specifically the relations between the Red Lanterns on Yzmolt and the Guardians on Oa. And we see that Zelias Zox has continued in his role as leader and become basically Prime Minister, or some fancy title. I'm just going to call him the Prime Minister for the sake of simplicity. And now, granted, he does have legitimate grievances with the Green Lantern Corps, with the Guardians, and he even did say, and I'm glad they show that in the flashback, that he was basically planning to squeeze the Guardians for everything that he could possibly get. And when we see him, really playing into this as soon as the Guardian arrives. Zox is there making political theater because Appa Aliapsa didn't come and instead sent one of the other Guardians. And again, this is just really him trying to make political hay to kind of score some points with his people. And, this is really just pure politics. You can see and think of many, many examples pretty much every day, every week out there in the real world of politicians doing this exact kind of same thing. So I do like that, and it is, of course, very realistic. Now, of course, this being a superhero show, the absolute worst thing has to happen at the absolute worst possible time. And of course, this is a Manhunter being reactivated on Yzmolt. And of course, this is really just about a big a piece of poop hitting the fan as could possibly happen. And I do like that we are shown that the Guardians are basically trying to cover this up, which does kind of fit into the idea that the Guardians are not always trustworthy. Now, granted, this is you can genuinely make the case that doing so really is for the greater good in this situation, but still. And the only real problem that I have with all of this is that this ultimately ends up really getting turned into comedy. I mean, not that it wasn't somewhat funny. I certainly will give the show that, but this really felt like something that really should have been treated with more seriousness than it was. Now, granted, we also are this episode is not exactly lacking on seriousness, especially in regards to what happens with Razor and Aya, which I'll get into in a minute. But just the way it all played out really ended up looking like a comedy, which, okay, that was, of course, the intent, but when you take something like that and you turn it into a comedy, you lose really all the drama that kind of goes along with it. Now, initially, when this happened, it seemed like an extremely ominous event, something that could really, as was said, reignite a war, and something that basically could start a humongous war, a repeat of one that has already cost a lot of people their lives, and it ultimately gets turned into a comedy. I mean, I feel like I was watching like a really, really bad episode of Star Trek there. For a minute, If you're familiar with Deep Space Nine, you might remember the episode Latinum and Lace. I won't say that this episode was quite that bad in this regard, but yeah, that really didn't work for me. And of course, the whole worst aspect of all of this is the character of Zolias Zox. He's turned into basically just a big coward and a pompous idiot. Now, let's think about how Zox was when we saw him. First, one of the very first things that we're introduced to him doing is helping to kill a Green Lantern. And he's basically there being one of the leaders of the Red Lanterns, who's really just sort of helping Atrocitus and spurring this, horrible war and death and destruction, and yeah. And now he's treated as a subject of comedy. I mean, like, I can't help but think of, if you're familiar with that old 60s TV show, Hogan's Heroes, where they're basically full of a bunch of bumbling Nazis, because the show was set in the Second World War. Yeah. And really, I mean, this just feels like anything that made Zolias Zox a character you should take seriously and see in any way, shape, or form as menacing or dangerous is just completely thrown out the window. He just now seems like a dumb, obnoxious. Oh boy, there's a choice of words in regards to this. Basically, a dumb, obnoxious version of SpongeBob SquarePants. Now, of course, that's fitting given that he's voiced by Tom Kenny, but still, I mean, I don't know how I'm supposed to take Zox seriously after this. I mean, he turns down the chance to go out and do violence? I mean, are we forgetting that this guy is a Red Lantern? Brother. So, I think that really covers everything I have to say about that. Now, of course, the real juice of this story is the romance between Aya and Razor coming to a head, and them, really admitting their feelings for each other, with Razor essentially putting the memories of his dead wife to rest and saying, I'm ready to move on fully, to love again. And I like how over the course of this series this is all handled very subtly. There is no real, go and seek romantic advice from, your player buddy or anything like that. It's all a very quiet story with Aya and Razor each coming to their own conclusions in their own way. Now, not without bumps along the way, but in just a very measured way. In a way that doesn't need everything to be spelled out. In a way where we can just use our own emotions and our own intuition to understand their feelings. And it just comes to a head in genuinely a very touching and beautiful way. Of course, this is a comic book show, so happiness can never last. And of course, when something like this happens, immediately it has to blow up in the hero's face in the worst possible way imaginable. I swear to God, Joss Whedon would be proud of this episode. And if you're a Joss fan like myself, you know exactly what I mean. God, Joss, I love you, but sometimes, man, sometimes. But anyway, so now we have lost Aya, and man, that way she died, that was some pretty brutal stuff. I know there are definitely going to be some fans out there who are going to be upset that the show did lose its only consistent female character, and I do have to say I would consider that a legitimate criticism of this show. But again, we are dealing with a comic book show, and one of the nice things about that is that folks can quite easily come back from the dead. Now, a little confused as to why getting zapped by the Anti-Monitor could so easily destroy Aya. I mean, she is a machine. Why can't she be repaired? Why can't she be salvaged in some way? I mean, why does she not keep a backup of herself in case of just this sort of situation? I mean, you'd think that she would be a little bit smarter than to keep all of her eggs in one basket, as it were. I mean, my lovely iPhone here is constantly reminding me that it needs to be backed up, but I don't. So, you would think that Aya would have taken some precaution there. Now, again, that maybe she did, and she just didn't have the opportunity to communicate that to Razor. Maybe there's something there. The way she died, it actually did remind me a little bit of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, but I don't think we're going to be seeing a repeat of that. Now, I've said many times before that if you watch carefully, you can spot the very obvious influence of Star Trek on this show, but I don't think the writers are going to be that blatant about it. And then, of course, there's always the option of the good old Star Sapphires. I really can't help but think that there's something more to do with them this season, especially in regards to what we're dealing with here. I mean, Aya really would genuinely be a perfect choice to be a Star Sapphire. But, again, this is just me speculating a little bit, which isn't something that I normally do, but given that we've lost the future of this show so suddenly and honestly in a way that seems rather callous to us as fans. And that, believe you me, that is not something that I say lightly. It's one of my real constant peeves with fandom is the way people seem to think that the people that make the books and the movies and the TV shows that we love somehow enjoy making us suffer. And, to go back to Joss Whedon, he's a guy who likes to write stories that make us have that emotional reaction. But he's not doing it out of malice or schadenfreude or anything like that. He's doing it because Joss Whedon knows what makes a good story. But the idea that, people in the various executive boardrooms are like, hey, this show's popular and the fans really love it. Let's cancel it just to make them feel upset and bad. Like seriously. The people that run big companies, despite what we might think, are not Snidely Whiplash, okay? They're not Dick Dastardly. They may do things for money or for reasons that we think are stupid, but they're not doing this just for the sheer yucks that they might get out of ruining your day. All right? I mean, come on. Let's all be a little bit more mature than that. So, with that said, let's talk about the Anti-Monitor briefly. He's back on the show. His killing Aya, of course, is going to be some pretty serious motivation for our heroes. I'm always a little iffy on the villain kills somebody so that the heroes feel motivated. Now, not that that's necessarily good or bad. It really depends on how it is written. By sheer coincidence, I actually happened to watch the movie Avengers today. And if you've seen that, spoiler, Agent Coulson dies, and that's really the kind of the kick in the butt the Avengers need to go out and save the day. And not surprisingly, that was written by Joss Whedon. And that's an example of doing that sort of thing and doing it right. Now, I can list a great many examples of places where that is done wrong, but I don't really think that's necessary. I'm sure everybody has their own personal list of that sort of thing. So, as the wonderful Stan Lee is so fond of saying, enough said. Anyway, folks, I believe that's really all I have for you this time. It is really going to be sad to finish out this season and know that there's not really going to be any more of such a really great show, of a show that really is what the live-action Green Lantern movie should have been. But, what is. So let's enjoy these remaining episodes that we have, and just be thankful that we at least did get this one season, this one really, really, well, not perfect, but still very excellent realization of the mythology of Green Lantern. And let's also keep in mind that while this show might leave the air, the comics aren't going anywhere anytime soon. So there will always, of course, be Green Lantern within easy reach for all of us to enjoy. And with that said, folks, we're going to wrap it up here. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And, of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.